Okay, we need to have a serious discussion, and I'm definitely tiptoeing the line here with some pretty powerful organizations. I am going to share some stuff with you guys that I really shouldn't, but I can, so I will. As somebody who previously worked for the PPA, which many of you will know, one of my long-standing opinions has been that they always try to push the bill with these companies that they ultimately are trying to get to buy into the idea that they are the best tour in the US. And that has finally reached a boiling point. Some large companies in the pickleball paddle space have all co-signed an agreement to essentially boycott the UPA's proposed broadcasting and licensing fees, among others, which are intended to supplement their paddle testing, as well as create standards for marketing for those companies on the tour. While we don't have a lot of facts about the situation just yet, and you guys know I prefer to operate on the facts, we do have the original letter that was submitted to the UPA, which we'll quickly dissect, and I'll provide some insight based off of conversations I've had with companies that have co-signed the agreement, as well as my personal experience with the head honchos at the PPA. Oh, and if any of you guys are watching this, by the way, I am supposed to be on vacation here in Mexico. But don't worry about this guy back here. He's totally not harnessing the powers of Tlaloc and other Mexica deities to judge whether or not you are all worthy. Of what? I don't know. But like I said, don't worry about it. So let's dig in. We'll attack this paragraph by paragraph, but starting off at the beginning, this letter is addressed directly to Jason Aspis, as I mentioned earlier. And the first paragraph is essentially a direct statement from the companies that they are dissatisfied with the current protocols for paddle inclusion and certification on the PPA and MLP tours. There's really not much to read into here, and it's very telling what the message is through the sentence in the middle that reads in part, quote, "We believe that a fully independent, nonprofit certification body is essential for maintaining fairness, transparency, and impartiality across the industry." When we look at the second paragraph, it essentially indicates that the companies are operating on the belief that while USAP has done a pretty crap job over the last several months with certification process, there hasn't been a strong enough argument from the UPA that they are any better than the status quo. I mean, the paragraph literally states, "We recognize the shortcomings of USAP's current certification and compliance process." But the problem is that it continues to read, quote, "Introducing an additional certifying entity will cause confusion within the sport, hindering growth and limiting openness to competition." What's important to note here is that while these companies have all co-signed to not pay any fees at all, including broadcasting, marketing, licensing fees, etc., a lot of the grievances in the document deal with the monies specifically intended for use for paddle certification. Something a lot of company owners have talked about, especially of mid-sized companies, and quite correctly, is that there is already an education and a knowledge base set up around whether a paddle is USAP or not USAP approved. And so introducing UPA into this fold creates a situation where newer players to the sport may get lost in the minutia of when and where they can use their paddle. Whether a company is paying the 50K licensing fee for Pro and Challenger Tour use, or the much lower amount for broadcasting and marketing, which is closer to the 2000 range, there is a similar unifying story that emerges, which is that the vast majority of these funds are intended for use for the paddle certification process. And yet there is zero clarity on where exactly these costs are coming from and whether or not the UPA is simply inflating them, which is unnecessarily crowding out competition. The third paragraph essentially delves into the fact that there is an unspoken relationship between what's supposed to be an independent governing body in the UPA-A and these pro tour related organizations like the UPA and PPA that directly benefit from established deals with certain paddle companies. And what's more is that there is no established communication on the current rules and regulations, how they were created, where funding is being used, what equipment is being used, how you create new ones in the future, etc., etc. Which, if you think about it, is absolutely insane. If you think about it, imagine this was the oil and gas industry and there were no established rules or regulations for equipment or location for oil and gas exploration programs. There would be lawsuits filed yesterday from either communities inadvertently affected or companies themselves if the regulatory agency decided to crack down. I mean, something that a lot of people don't realize is that for use on Pro and Challenger Tour, there is a continuous, almost membership type fee that's around 75,000 in the second year and potentially moving forward. So a lot of companies wonder, with again, these funds that are supposed to be going towards paddle certification, Why would there be a continuous fee for paddles that have theoretically already been certified? And I want to re-emphasize, a lot of these things aren't things that USAP is much better at, but it's a simple case of not breaking the system more than it is already broken. And so after all this setup, in the next section, we're officially at the call to action. This is where the cosign companies officially ask for a reprieve of no less than 1 year from the comprehensive broadcasting participation, which again, a lot of companies aren't paying for, and licensing fees for marketing in order to ensure that rules are created fairly and transparently from the beginning. They state that, quote, this reprieve period will allow ample time to develop a thorough, transparent, and unbiased certification process, ensuring that these standards are done right the first time. This is probably my favorite part of the letter because it's where you officially see the UPA-A called out on their BS. They're essentially saying, we're not going to go on the same merry-go-round like we did with USAP, where as soon as paddles started getting too powerful, they started creating their own rules. We're going to make sure that the rules are clear and upfront and precise, and that we're all clued in on what they are before we go into production, and especially before we plan for future releases. This part's also great because it's a reaffirmation in my mind that these companies aren't going to pay a dime over what is fair for these fees. I'll share the screenshots I've gotten of what the broadcasting and marketing fees are looking like, and you'll see that they are absolutely insane from what their books look like in my experience. I mean, some company owners have remarked that it almost looks like they're trying to reach a revenue goal with deals like this. And if you were to ask me that question based on my experience, my answer wouldn't necessarily be no. And to play devil's advocate for a moment, of course, I'm going to be biased with the opinions that I introduce in particular, but it's hard to ignore when one side of the argument says in writing, quote, we are committed to working together to support a balanced, independent certification process that aligns with our shared vision for the future of pickleball. And the other side looks like a tour that is run by somebody who I have in person literally seen decrease the amount of time for timeouts so that certain matches get shown on national broadcast as opposed to others. I mean, I'm not going to out who actually made that judgment call on site, but all I know is that if my name wasn't Ben Johns or Jack Sock and my match wasn't planned to be shown on Fox, but I'm an up and comer on the tour and my next opponent is a Federico Staxrud, a JMV, a Hunter Johnson, a Kate Fahey, a Leia Jansen, and the actual organizer of the tour states, quote, the nightmare scenario is this match goes to 3 games and my match is being accelerated to show particular matches on TV at a particular time, I would be mad as fuck. I'm not even going to lie to you guys. And so to wrap up here, the last 2 sentences really of the letter read as follows. Finally, we want to emphasize that the cosign manufacturers have each separately evaluated this situation, and at present, none intend to pay any certification or marketing licensing fees until the above-mentioned actions are implemented and a fair, transparent certification process is fully established. Thank you for your understanding. We look forward to collaborating on an approach that strengthens our sport's integrity and growth. And I think that is pretty straightforward in and of itself. So, where do we go from here? Well, there are some other company owners I need to speak to that have either signed or plan to sign this document. And there is going to be, from what I'm told, more information coming out when Chris Olsen and the Pickleball Studio sit down with Tom Barnes from Selkirk later on down the road. So, whenever that does come out, I'll make sure to recap again in a super short video with all the new information that I learn. I mean, what strikes me the most here at the end is just the state of the paddle companies on this list. I mean, you've got Komodo, who first introduced Kevlar to the market. You've got Reload, who has a case for the best innovation tech in 2024. You've got Vatic Pro, who makes amazing budget paddles. You've got Gearbox, who everybody assumed was going to be in bed with UPA to make sure that their paddles stayed legal. You've got Head, one of the biggest names in tennis now in pickleball. And of course, you've got Selkirk. But I feel like everybody knew that was coming with Yola being looped in with UPA. You've got to have Selkirk on the other side.
Either they are going or I am going. And I am certainly not going.
But I digress. Again, I will be back with another quick and super efficient video when more facts are on the table and that time comes to speak more on this issue. So make sure you like and subscribe for that. And of course, comment down below what your current thoughts are in the situation. I love having discussions with you guys, whether you agree or disagree. And I'm very open to having my opinion changed at all times. In the meantime, I hope you all stay happy and healthy. And of course, out on the courts until the next video. Oh, and remember, Tlaloc is always watching. Peace.